Hey guys, let's talk about obedience for a minute. And specifically, how effective is obedience? How useful is it? How necessary is it for solving behavior problems? Because there really are two schools of thought on this, and they could not be further opposed. There is some people who say, hey, listen, I solve behavior problems. I don't care about sit down, stay, calm, all that stuff. I just want the dog to get along in his home better. And other people say, listen, obedience solves all those problems. You take a dog through a good obedience program, and almost all those problems are going to go away. And if they don't go away, they're going to make it easier to solve those problems. So, who's correct? Well, it kind of depends a little bit, right? Not all obedience is equal. So I see it a lot of times. People come in, they've had their dogs go through an obedience program at one of the box stores or something like that, and they've learned how to teach their dog to sit, they've learned how to teach their dog to lie down, they've learned how to teach their dog to come, but he still has separation anxiety. He's still a destructive chewer. He still digs in the trash. He still counter surfs. The behavior hasn't changed, but they can tell the dog to sit, and the dog sits. And they go, obedience didn't help me, right? And part of the problem with that is that bad obedience can become very transactional. And what I mean by that is, if you do X, I will do Y. If you do X, I will do Y. If you do X, I will do Y. And this is why a lot of old school trainers sort of don't like food-based training because it feels too much like a bribe, right? They say, oh, I don't want to bribe the dog. It's that transactional nature that's the problem. It's not the food. The important thing is that the food is, again, it's considered a transaction as opposed to a reward event. One of the things that I tell all my clients early on is that I'm not interested in telling the dog what I expect from him. I'm not interested in telling the dog what I want from him. I'm telling the dog what he can expect from me. If under these circumstances you behave in a certain way, you can expect me to behave one way. If you behave a different way, you can expect me to behave a different way. But you get to decide how I respond to you based on your behavior. And that makes things different. Now I am a guide through the environment and not just a treat dispenser. I help them figure out the puzzle. I help them figure out how to make that environment the most rewarding and most enjoyable place it can be. And I help them avoid making mistakes. And that's not transaction, that's relationship building. Now I'm become a coach. I'm helping them achieve success. I first tell them success is available, and then I help them achieve it. Now, the other thing will happen too, though. So people will go to a different style of trainer, and they'll say, "Hey, I went to obedience, and now the dog is doing much better on all these things." And that's not necessarily it can be, but that's not necessarily because the training was better. A lot of old school training, not all of it. I'm not bashing old school training. I'm not bashing balance training, but I'm bashing bad balance training. A lot of old school training is very much based on negative consequences, very much based on if you do the wrong thing, it's going to make your life unpleasant. You're going to not want to do that. I'm going to make it unpleasant when you do that. And what can happen when you do that is a dog can lose confidence, and so they will cling to the few things that they're confident about. If I'm unsure what to do, I'm going to sit because sit is always a good thing. Sit never results in me getting in trouble. So the dog is going to default at these positions that have been successful at avoiding punishments before. And that's not necessarily a dog who's happy. That's a dog who's learned how to not get into trouble, which is a different thing entirely. He's learned to sort of tightrope walk through the maze of life by sticking into a few very simple behaviors. When he's uncertain, he goes back to these default behaviors, which is a good survival mechanism, but doesn't necessarily mean we have an empowered or a happy dog, right? But that dog's not going to make choices that are dangerous because they're not going to risk anything. They have already learned, that curiosity has been somewhat suppressed by a lot of consequences, so they tend to be more reserved, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a happier dog. But that difference has to do with the way the training is done. Again, I want to state this is not a balanced versus positive discussion here. It's not what I'm talking about. The thing is, good obedience training should not be modular. In other words, sit is not its own thing. Sit is part of a spectrum of behaviors, if you will. It's part of a relationship, if you will. You always want to use obedience. If you're going to use obedience, it should be done in a way that informs the dog about the greater world, about their role in the world, about what to expect from you, how humans respond, how you respond, and how to make that world the most beneficial place for them to be. It's not just about X, Y, Z, right? Every For me, obedience is about teaching the dog to communicate, allow me to communicate. It's about teamwork. I learn to read the dog better. The dog learns to read me better. We learn what to expect from one another. We build a more cohesive, coherent bond, right? One of the things I say a lot is be the coach, not the cop. And what does that mean? If you if your coach tells you, hey, you did that wrong, that's not as threatening as when the cop pulls you over. When you look in rear view, you see those lights going on, you don't go, oh, this cop's just coming to inform me that I made a mistake. You think this cop is coming to impose a penalty on me for the mistake I made. Whereas your coach goes, hey, if you do that day of competition, you're probably going to lose. You go, oh, I better get a handle on that. And that's relationship building. That's not transactional, right? The coach doesn't do that, doesn't give you that advice so that you can pay him later. Like the whole relationship is about building trust. You have a goal and he has a goal and it's the same goal. And your dog and you should share a goal, and that is that you both want to make the relationship as rewarding and as beneficial for both of you as possible. That's how love behaves. That's how companionship behaves. Your dog is not your employee. He's not your slave. He's your companion. He's your buddy. He's your friend, and you want to have a great relationship with him. And that's the way obedience should be approached. And if you do it that way, you're going to start to see some things differently. He's going to start to be, if I say sit and all he's concerned about is whether I give him a treat or not, then I am not that valuable to him, right? If I don't have food and I say sit, I still want to go, yes, sir, I love this sit. This is fun. I like doing things with you. And that's what we want. We want to build a love of the work, not a love of the reward, that the reward that is, signified through the work. Um, and that's the other thing too is when it comes down to it, obedience is about impulse control, right? If I have a dog staying and I'm bouncing their favorite ball in front of them and they're not moving, it's because they're choosing not to move. They have an impulse to move. They have a desire to go for that ball, and they're making a decision. I don't want to do that right now. I'm going to go ahead and hold this position because I know that's the most rewarding path. And impulse control is necessary for a lot of the problems we talk about. Like if your dog is jumping on you, that is often an impulse control problem. Dog is super excited. Yes, maybe he knows that you don't like him jumping up. Maybe you've yelled at him for it before. Maybe you've punished him for it before. Maybe you've tried to do all sorts of strategies that you've seen online, but he just gets so excited. And he does it just like when you're a little kid and you're running ahead because there's something really cool ahead and your parents are saying, slow down. You're going, but it's fun. I want to go. The dog is just too excited. Excitement reduces impulse control. So we've got to practice that. We've got to build that muscle so that even when it's reduced, even when that ability to self-regulate is reduced due to excitement, the dog still has the wherewithal to do it. And that's one of the great things about obedience. I tell people all the time, I train obedience in order to not need obedience. Once the dog is trained really well and they learn what good decisions feel like and what bad decisions feel like and how to make good and bad decisions, you don't necessarily need to keep nudging them back into place with obedience. Sure, you should still have it. If you tell your dog to heel, he should heel. If you tell him to sit, he should sit. But I'm saying that when I have a dog that's really well trained, I almost never give them commands. My dog Sadie, she's getting up there in years. She's been around for a long time, and she's going deaf. And it took me months to realize she was going to deaf. Why? Because I don't tell her to do things. I don't have to. I get out of work. She walks out. She goes to the bathroom. She walks to the car with or without a leash. I don't have to tell her to do that. Maybe she runs off a little bit and does a big victory lap circle. She comes back. I'm not worried about that. I don't have to call her. It took me months to realize that she couldn't hear because I don't have to nudge her into place. And that's where I think most people want to be with their dogs. They want dogs that just know how to belong in their family. All right. So obedience is valuable for building that relationship and creating an impulse control. And if your obedience is done correctly, it's going to build those things up. If it's done incorrectly, it's not going to help you at all. Like it's not about whether you're using food or not. It's not about whether you're using corrections or not. It's about whether ultimately the obedience training is building a better understanding and a better partnership between you and your dog, or if it is not doing that, right? So yes, obedience is super valuable, super helpful, but if it's done incorrectly, it's not going to help you much at all. All right. So that's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.